I am an Able United, and we're happy to be joined by John Finch, Able United Director.
Good
Um,
afternoon or morning for our Central
that's
Time
right.
folks.
So just a few housekeeping items before we kick off. Feel free to use the Q&A or chat feature in Zoom panel controls in the bottom throughout the webinar. We have a team that'll be monitoring those, and we can flag anything up to John that he can answer live as well. If you look down to the resources box, there's a documents tab where the presentation that John is going to be going over is saved there, so you can download it at any time and refer back to it. We are also recording this webinar, and it'll be posted on our YouTube page in the coming days, so you can refer back to that as well. But those of you that are on now and registered, you will be receiving a 1-hour in-service credit, and that will be sent to you with the email address that you use to RSVP for this webinar. So you'll get that probably within the next week or so. And with that, I'll pass it on to John to kick off our presentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steph. I appreciate it. And I know that's what everybody's excited for is continuing education units. And so we will get to those as soon as possible. Hopefully be early next week. We'll get to those. So be on the lookout. It will come as a through Outlook for my email address as a PDF. And so make sure you keep that documentation and record for yours. So like I said, that will come out next. And then hopefully this time I won't mess up my mail merge and send the wrong documents to the wrong people. So but you'll get that certification. And we also have, just as a reminder, our presentation is in the resources tab. You can download that. But in the certificate, we'll have both the certificate with the APD approval code, along with the agenda for today's presentation, which is about ABLE accounts. So we're all going to be talking about ABLE United and ABLE accounts. And we thought for many of you, hopefully this isn't the first time you've heard about ABLE accounts or ABLE United, and that you're pretty familiar with them. So we decided to throw some icebreaker type of questions at you just to see how up to date you are with ABLE accounts or ABLE United before we dig into the presentation. So with that, do I have the power to do polls? If not, let's go ahead and put the first poll up there. Here we go. In 2026, the Able Age Adjustment Act will officially increase the diagnosis age for eligibility from 26 to, is it A, 76, B, 36, or C, 46? So that is a good question there. So if this is your first time, you might not know this, but if you've been on our mail server, email listserv, and received our newsletters or other content, if you've been paying attention to our social media pages, or just in general able account informations nationwide, you might be able to answer this question. And I know for most of you, since you're serving individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities through the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, 99% of the people you serve have had a diagnosis prior to age 26. So, but this new Age Adjustment Act is going to really bump it up to allow this broader spectrum of individuals. So, we'll give everybody another second or two to answer their question. What do you think the new age is going to go up to for that diagnosis? 76, 36, or 46? Do we look at the answers? All right. So 70% of you put 36 will be the new age. Actually, the answer is C, 46. So 22% of you, congratulations. The 16 of you, pat yourselves on the back who answered that question correctly. Yeah, so 22% got it right. So that Age Adjustment Act is going to basically increase that diagnosis age, which we'll talk more about in the presentation, from 26 to 46. So it's really going to capture a lot of mental health diagnoses, maybe multiple sclerosis or other types of disability that were diagnosed between that 26 to 46 range. And so let's go ahead and do the next poll question because it's, get you guys on here. What is the current annual contribution limit for an ABLE account? Is it A, 17,000, B, 15,000, or C, 18,000? This is kind of fun. I kind of want to do a game show. Maybe next time APD will let me do a game show for continuing education units and make it fun. But what is the current annual contribution limit? Is it 17,000, 15,000, 18,000? And bonus points, if you're in the QA, you could tell us when we launched the program in July 1 of 2016, which you'll hear about, what was the initial contribution limit? I don't even know if Steph remembers. I think Steph might not even been on the Able Account program as our public records administrator there. So, uh, but give everybody a second. Go ahead and close that poll down if you haven't answered. You're about to see the answer now. Let's see how many of you got it correct. 17,000, 15,000, or 18,000. Actually, the correct answer was 17,000 is the current annual contribution limit. So 23% of you, a little bit better, but hopefully you're going to answer all these questions and more. You'll get to know all about the Able United program, why it's such a benefit for the individuals you serve, and then we want to make sure we reach as many people as we can. So hopefully you're able to see the presentation. And as just a reminder, you will get the certification that you attended this as long as you attend majority of the presentation. We'll be sending those out next week. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. But let's talk about Florida's Disability Savings and Investment Program, Able United. Once again, my name is John Finch. I'm the director of the program. And what we're going to talk about today is kind of outlined here. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the program, the legislation that made this program exist, both federally and in the state. We're going to talk about how it's managed here in the state of Florida, who's actually eligible to have an Able account. We're really going to dig into why it's important and how it works with public benefits, especially iBudget waiver or supplemental security income. Then we'll talk about, okay, we're eligible. You might have individuals that want to enroll. What does that look like? How do they enroll and then manage their account? We'll talk a little bit about Able accounts of special needs trust. Just as a reminder, I'm not an attorney, nor am I a financial planner. So all this is for educational information. At the end of the day, I'm a state employee here in Tallahassee. And then finally, we'll tackle one of our most frequently asked questions is what happens to the funds if the beneficiary passes away? So let's start with just the history. What is the ABLE account? What is the ABLE Act that made this allowable for states to even offer? So if you've been in the disability field for any length of time, we know we love our acronyms. ABLE is the same way. ABLE actually is an acronym for Achieving a Better Life Experience, and it was made possible through the passage of a piece of legislation known as the ABLE Act. And this actually took place back in 2014. Finally, after about 10 years of advocacy and hard work, it passed, and it allowed, basically amended and created a new section in the Internal Revenue Code, Section 529A. So that's an important thing to think about. This is a tax advantage. This is a IRS sanctioned savings and investment tool. And what it did was allow states to create these tax advantage savings and investment accounts to really encourage individuals to save and put funds aside to help support their health, independence, and quality of life. So if there's anything you take from away from today is to realize that, hey, this is a savings and investment tool. It's specifically designed for the disability population, so it doesn't impact their public benefits. And it helps them save for future expenses, whether it be long-term or short-term. So just keep that in mind. So as we go through this, you might be comparing this investment account, savings account to other products that exist, like a 529 college savings plan, a special needs trust, a checking a savings account, a Roth IRA. So it's kind of all these unique financial products rolled into one and specifically designed and advocated for individuals with disabilities. So, talking a little bit about the history, how is it established here in the state of Florida? We're under the Florida Prepaid College Board. We came along in July 2016 when legislation actually passed in July 2015 to allow this the state to create this, and they actually decided to create it under the Florida Prepaid College Savings Plan, and we launched July 1 of 2016. So, been around for a little over 7.5 years almost. So if you think about Florida Prepaid, they've been around since the 80s. They've helped over 1 million people save for high education expenses. And now they're helping the disability population save for a variety of expenditures through the Able United program. So we have that little tagline, save for a better life experience, because that's really unique about this is encouraging and allowing individuals to save more, typically more than $2,000 without impacting their public benefits. Now, I want to put this out here because we get this question a lot, or people refer to our program as Able Trust accounts or Able Trust. We are not the Able Trust. So, Able Trust is a lead provider in helping and assisting organizations seek successful employment for Floridians with disabilities. So you might have customers or clients that have gone through Able Trust or utilized different Social Security work benefit incentive programs, and Able Trust has been mentioned. They are very much focused on employment. We are Able United. We're more on the savings investment tool. So no, we're not Able Trust. No, we don't offer Able Trust accounts. We offer just Able accounts. And what's great about this program, as I mentioned, is this was actually spearheaded by individuals with disabilities. A group of parents, Jen Sikora being one of those in the top left with their son Sean, were sitting around a dining room table saying, why isn't there a way to start putting money aside without impacting our children's future? And so, through her hard work and advocacy and advocates just like her across this country, they banded together to say, hey, let's push through some legislation to really encourage individuals and to allow them to save without negatively impacting their future. And so, through her hard work and advocacy, after 10 years, that piece of legislation finally passed. I keep joking. We probably need to get an updated picture because Sean, I think, turned 21 this year. So a little bit. This is early on when the program first launched, but it really opened the doors for a variety of individuals with disabilities. So although it started primarily in the Down syndrome and the autism kind of spectrum, it really opened the doors for Alicia here on the bottom, who uh, uses a wheelchair for mobility, and she really wants to save and invest into a wheelchair accessible vehicle to really help her mom as she moves her around, as she looks for employment or wherever the case may be, and being able to save that money without never impacting her Medicaid. So really a fun new tool on how people can do that. And you might have individuals that maybe are on the wait list, maybe they're not receiving benefits currently, such as Elliot here in the top right with his mom Sandra. Elliot isn't on public benefits, but utilizes the Able account to store extra funds he gets from his DJing, and then use his funds as he needs, whether it be to offset some of his business costs or to help just have a quality of life experience, whether that be for entertainment or just buying basic living expenses like groceries. So pretty broad. And the great thing is, as we talk about the eligibility requirements here, the individuals you serve through APD qualify for an ABLE account. And so we're going to talk a little bit about eligibility, but this is important to know because you may have family members or individuals that are not necessarily being served by APD that might also qualify for an ABLE account. So, as we're talking about the eligibility, it's important to be mindful of that an individual can only have one ABLE account nationwide. So, if you think of other financial products, whether it be a checking account, a savings account, even different retirement accounts, you can have multiple ones of those, but you can only have one ABLE account. That beneficiary can only have one ABLE account. And so that's important to remember. But there are three qualifications to be eligible for an ABLE account. And the first one is true for Florida because we are the state of Florida's program. An individual does have to be a Florida resident at the time they apply. That's unique to our program. Each state gets to set these up. Some states have nationwide enrollment. Some are only open into a couple other partner states. But of the 43 programs, about 27 of them are only open for their state's residents, while the rest of them are open. So the benefit of that is individuals in Florida have a variety of ABLE accounts they can look at, and you'll see why I think Florida is the best program to stick with, just because of our fee structure, which, spoiler alert, we don't really have any fees. So keep that in mind. But the other two requirements are true for all ABLE programs. This is federal law that we all have to follow. And as people go through the enrollment process, it's stuff they're going to have to certify that they meet. One is that they have a disability onset prior to age 26. As I mentioned before, APD, most all the individuals you serve had a diagnosis prior to that, whether it be cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, Down syndrome, an intellectual disability, and there's some other ones as well. But those are diagnosed usually prior to that age, so no worry there. But for some individuals, they might have had a later in life diagnosis after the age 26. Currently, they're not eligible to have an ABLE account. However, in 2026, the Able Age Adjustment Act passed a couple years ago, but it moves that number from 46 or from 26 to 46 in 2026. So almost a couple years away, but it's really going to broaden who can access that account. And we'll be doing a lot more outreach in the mental health area, as well as maybe veterans who've had a disability diagnosed during their time. So just keep that in mind. As I say, it might not be applicable to you, but you might have family members that could benefit. The final requirement is that the individual's diagnosis or that disability has to be severe. So it's not something where, hey, I broke my arm or I'm having some type of surgery and I'm going to be out of commission for a while. It's truly a diagnosis that is causing them to basically affect their lifetime. And so the way that the IRS kind of justifies or explains what severity means is they've actually pointed back to Social Security Administration rules as it relates to a child, but regardless of age. And so they say, hey, if you're receiving SSI, so Supplemental Security Income, Title 16 benefits, or if you're receiving SSDI or Title 2 benefits, uh, then you automatically qualify if you're getting those because of your disability. If you don't meet either of those requirements, maybe they earn too much or maybe they have too much saved, then they would have to self-certify saying, hey, I meet that requirement, the diagnosis. However, due to these other situations, I'm earning too much or I have too much money or I live at home or wherever the case may be, they would have to self-certify saying, hey, I meet that severity requirement. And what it's going to do is say, hey, you're going to say, hey, I have a diagnosis prior to age 26. I could provide that diagnosis or paperwork qualifying that diagnosis to the IRS if asked, and it's expected to last at least 12 months. And so the question we get, though, tying back to that first question often is, well, what happens if the individual moves out of the state? Can they take the Able United account with them, or since they're no longer a Florida resident, do they have to close it down? The good news is they only have to be a Florida resident at the time they apply. So they could take the Able United account with them out of the state. So be mindful that if you, with your caseload, if you're getting new individuals that are coming in and they're from out of state or they're fairly new to the state of Florida, you may want to see if they have an ABLE account because they can roll that ABLE account from another state into the ABLE United program. But just to make sure they can only have one ABLE account. As I mentioned about this disability severity, I do this in here, as I mentioned, most of the individuals you're serving are going to fit in either the first two or that fifth bullet point, I believe, where it talks about congenital anomalies like Down syndrome or Fragile X. But there's other disabilities that qualify as well. But you're going to see usually autism or Down syndrome, cerebral palsy is even considered a nervous disorder. So those types of disabilities are going to qualify and they're usually diagnosed pretty early in life. What's also unique about ABLE accounts is we think about who actually owns the account. So the individual with the disability, not only are they the beneficiary of the account, but they actually are the owner of the account. And we know not everybody's going to be able to manage their account, whether that be because of their disability, they don't have the capacity to manage it, or maybe they choose not to manage it. And so somebody else can actually be what we call the authorized legal representative. They're basically going to have signatory authority signatory on the account. So they're going to be authorized to make transactions or move money back and forth or send money to and there. But that list of individuals is actually a hierarchy, and it starts with a legal guardian. Then it goes down to a power of attorney. It could be a family member. It doesn't just have to be a family member of a minor, but it could be an adult child that has a parent that wants to manage the account. It could be a spouse, a sibling, a grandparent, and then also a representative payee. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to how this works with Social Security benefits. But a rep payee can actually set up and manage this account. And we're actually working with a lot of different organizational rep payees to establish accounts for quite a few of their individuals. So, for example, if you've heard of Sunland Mariana or Takachali over in Gainesville, those two organizations that are basically institutions under APD, we have them set up. They have ABLE accounts, so they're not bumping up to that annual resource limit. So we're solving a lot of issues there. But with that, I'm going to take a second and make sure we don't have any Q&A yet. Steph and Sam, just bring it to my attention or interrupt me because the screen where my presentation's over here, but I'm looking at the camera down here. So just let me know if questions come up. Feel free to.
Will do. No questions yet.
All right. Thanks, Steph. All right. Well, let's talk about ABLE and public benefits because if you're with APD as a support coordinator or supported living coach, you're serving individuals and they're on the iBudget waiver. They may even be on SSI. They could be on other public benefits. But let's talk about high level how these how this account works with those public benefits. So, as I mentioned, Medicaid, there's the state health plan that helps pay for like health insurance, but it's usually for individuals with significant disabilities or elderly or uh, single pregnant moms or something like that. Uh, there's also home and community-based waivers, which the iBudget waiver is one of those, right? It's an exception to the Medicaid rule, which is going to provide a lot more robust set of services. So that could be anything from housing or adult day training. It could be supported employment, job coaches, whatever the case may be. But one of those things is they say, hey, if you're on this, you can only have roughly $2,000 in your any account, right? Which isn't a lot of money. But the good news is that money generally in the ABLE account or even taken out of the ABLE account are disregarded when determining eligibility for Medicaid. So that $2,000 limit doesn't apply to the ABLE account. Now there was concern, so individuals were like, "Oh, is this just a way to kind of escape Medicaid payback?" Technically, there was some questions asked about that, and so Florida went ahead and passed its own legislation saying, "Hey, the state of Florida is not going to file a claim on an ABLE account, right? So it's not going to go back to Medicaid. However, it's important to know is that uh, if there are outstanding, if the individual does pass away and there is some outstanding funds, that it would go to the estate of the beneficiary, and that could be in line for Medicaid recovery if they're over the age of 55. I'm going to talk more about this towards the end of some slides. We'll really dig into how this account works after a beneficiary passes away. But the other big public benefit that I know at least a third of our individuals that are enrolled in the program say they receive is SSI, but you might be also having individuals you serve that are on supplemental security income. It's a cash amount check that helps pay for basic living expenses. Well, there are some additional rules because that also looks at only having $2,000 in an ABLE account or $2,000 in resources. Generally, once again, money in the ABLE account doesn't count towards that resource limit except for a few exceptions. One is that it can only have $100,000 in an ABLE account before it starts counting as a resource. So keep that in mind if somebody really needs that $915 check a month and they're on SSI. So just keep that in mind if they're getting close to the $100,000 limit. If they're not worried about SSI, maybe they're on SSDI or they're on it used to be called disabled adult children's. Now it's uh, adults with disabilities benefits. I think is what it's called now, where a parent retires and now their child receives some of their Social Security based on their parents' work history. Those programs don't care how much money you have on hand. They don't care. They don't care your resources. So in those situations, this account can actually go up to 418,000 before you can no longer contribute. Also, things to think about when somebody is receiving SSI and they have an ABLE account. If they pay for any housing related expenses or make a withdrawal for a non-qualified expense and retain onto it past the end of the month, then that would count as a resource. So, hey, if they're paying for housing related expenses with their ABLE account, they just need to make sure they pay it either directly out of the ABLE account or withdraw and pay it in the same month. But it's really if it's the retaining of funds where Social Security is going to look and say, hey, we see you have an extra $2,000 sitting over here in your bank account now. So you're now, you have 4,000 total. What is that extra $2,000 from ABLE account going to be used for? They're going to be able to mark in the system saying, hey, it's going to be used for, maybe it's a transportation issue, maybe it's an upcoming procedure that's not being covered by Medicaid that they're going to pay for. Those are fine. It's when you say, oh, I'm going to use this for housing and pay my rent next month, and you retain it past the end of the month, then that's when they're going to have the issue. I also want to make sure that individuals know that earned income and unearned income that goes directly into the ABLE account still counts as earned or unearned income. ABLE accounts do not shelter income. They only shelter resources. So we get this. I just had a presentation yesterday with a group that was wondering, hey, parents are worried about their child losing their SSI benefits because they're going to start working more. And unfortunately, ABLE doesn't solve that issue, right? And what I usually try to stress is, well, is it worth them working more and to get off of SSI, which only pays $915 a month, when they could be making $1,300, $1,500, $2,000 a month? And just to let you know, in case you weren't aware of, there's something called individuals working with disabilities. That's a piece of legislation that amended the Medicaid. So if they're on the iBudget waiver, and they're working more, they can actually keep their iBudget waiver funding, um, lose their SSI, but keep their Medicaid funding. So if you haven't heard working persons with disabilities language, definitely look up that resource because it could be beneficial for you all, for the individuals you're serving that are working. Other things to consider, I usually tell individuals if they're on SSI, we report monthly, so they're going to know that you have an ABLE account. So always be proactive and let Social Security individuals or individuals let Social Security know that they have an ABLE account. And then always check the POMS. If you're not familiar with the POMS, that is the Program Operations Manual System. Basically, it's a public facing document that Social Security holds and makes it public. And it basically tells how they're supposed to manage certain aspects of the Social Security Administration. So they have a specific one on ABLE accounts as it relates to SSI. So definitely check that out if you are serving individuals that are on SSI. To be wary of that. So I know that was a lot to cover in a couple of slides there, but Steph, team, do we have any questions as it relates to public benefits yet? Just as a reminder, use that QA box for any questions you may have.
No questions, but I wanted to flag that I'll be adding to the resource tab that information that you mentioned about the working individuals
Yeah,
with
awesome.
so I'll add that to there.
Great, great. Yeah, that's a very underutilized resource. I think some individuals that are working with APD or serving clients of that receive services from APD just don't know aware of. I've had multiple conversations. It's one of those hidden secrets they don't tell a lot of individuals worth. But I know several individuals that have taken advantage of it. It is kind of a tricky thing. The biggest thing being is they do have to register with the My Access Florida, which is where they would typically go if they were getting straight Medicaid or Florida SNAP benefits or something like that. But they do have to be in the My Access database in order to take advantage of that working persons with disabilities. So keep that in mind. All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about enrollment and account management. So where does an individual go to enroll into the ABLE United program? You're not going to go to your local bank or your credit union. You would actually visit ableunited.com. As I mentioned, this is a program that's run by the state of Florida, and so that's a snapshot of our website. Individuals would go there in the top right, there's the open account. There they would go to enroll in the program. They would come back to this page. Also, there's a sign in at the top right there as well, where they could sign into an account if they already have one. But yeah, ableunited.com is the first stop to start with the enrollment process. This is a financial product, so there is some information we're going to need before an account could be established. An email address that's probably going to be used for login purposes, but we're going to need to know personal identification information like date of birth, social. If somebody is managing this account on behalf of an individual, we're going to need their information as well. There will be some questions they'll ask to identify. If those are failed, then we'll ask you to submit a government issued ID card, because this is, at the end of the day, you are dealing with people's money and finances, so we need that information to protect the end user. Also, individuals are going to have to fill out the eligibility requirements, right? Are they self-certifying? Are they on SSI, SSDI? Select the type of diagnosis they have. And then once that's all completed, there'll be a section where your individuals will be able to actually contribute $25 to their ABLE account, which is the minimum to get started. After that, there is no minimum to continue to contribute. But once that $25 is selected and that bank account added, then they're going to select where that money goes. So let's talk about putting money into the account. So account's been set up. You want individuals to put money in there. How does that work and who can put money in it? Generally, contributions are considered completed gifts, not income towards the individual with a disability. So what that means is maybe you have family members that want to help somebody, but they say, oh, I can't give them money or I can't buy them things. Well, they can actually contribute to their ABLE account, not count as income, and then they would have those funds to be utilized as they need. And what's unique is it's very broad on who can put money in the account. The beneficiary could put their own money. If they have leftover Social Security funding, that can go into an ABLE account. A third party, so I have a friend of mine that always asks me to contribute on his birthday to his ABLE account. A business, an organization, those can all contribute to somebody's ABLE account. Now, here's that question that we asked you earlier. What's that limit? It is 17,000 per calendar year. That's actually going up to 18,000 starting in January, this coming up. So that's a significant amount of money that individuals can save. Uh, and there is options and an opportunity to actually roll over funds from a college savings plan to this account. Individuals, as I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about the rules when it comes to a rep payee wanting to put leftover Social Security funds into an ABLE account, which is allowable, but there's some rules we'll talk about. And then finally, maybe an individual has a special needs trust and they're fully funding their ABLE account each year, and the beneficiary is working. Can they actually contribute above that amount? And the answer is yes. So, able to work allows individuals who are working, not saving for retirement through a work employer or an employment based retirement plan, to actually contribute above the $17,000 annual contribution limit. And so that's just something important to think about as it comes to ABLE accounts and saving. We also have a unique gifting page. So this will be something that individuals will be able to create after the account has been opened. This will allow individuals to distribute their unique gifting URL online via social media. They could do an email blast out to family and friends, but it's just a great way to allow others to help assist them in saving for a better life experience. And that can be done via ACH online. There's also ways where we see a lot of people just mail in a check. You can do that as well, and that information is relatable. So let me talk a little bit of this. This is another question that is getting more and more, just because the PALMS manual, as I mentioned earlier, from Social Security, actually provided some additional guidance on what happens when you start putting leftover or Social Security funds into an ABLE account. So yes, you can. SSA Palm clarifies that you could do a direct deposit of Social Security benefits into an ABLE account, whether that be Social Security benefits or SSI, Supplemental Security Income benefits. All those are acceptable to be distributed into an ABLE account, or if they have leftover Social Security funds, those can be put in the ABLE account. But there's just some additional rules to think about. One is that Social Security Administration requests that individuals who have a rep payee, they be the authorized signatory on the ABLE United account. So keep that in mind, where you might have a situation where there's family involved or a guardian that's not serving as the rep payee, and the rep payee, whoever that is, wants to put leftover Social Security funds in the ABLE account. They're not going to be able to unless they are the authorized signatory on the account. So something to keep in mind if you're working. I know there's quite a few organizations that utilize ABLE accounts to retain excess Social Security funds so they can maintain their Medicaid or iBudget waiver eligibility. So something to think about. Also, if an individual is changing their rep payees, which is allowable, instead of typically, if there's retained or conserved funds, those have to be sent back to Social Security and then redistributed back to the beneficiary. Instead, what can be done though is there's a way to change that authorized signatory without going through the process of sending that money to Social Security or any of that sort of nature. So just keep that in mind. There's a change of what we call a change of authorized legal representation form that's available on our website, or individuals can call. And then finally is the rules as it relates to commingled funds when it comes to Social Security. So that's just something to think about. Once again, we always tell individuals to keep documentation. All right, so individuals are putting the money in the account, but what's actually going? Where's that money actually going? And so what's unique, as I mentioned from the very beginning, this is an investment and or a savings tool, right? So individuals can make this an investment option, they can make it a savings option, they can make it both. And so we have a variety of options depending on somebody's desire or needs. We have an FDIC savings fund. So if they just want to say, hey, I don't want to invest in the market at all, I want something very low risk that has FDIC insurance, we have an FDIC option. Maybe individuals do want to invest. Maybe there's, part of their planning is it's 3, 5, 10 years down the road before they utilize this fund in the ABLE account. They can actually pick one of our pre-designed portfolios that are made up of, as you can see, various underlying fund options. So the riskier you are, it's going to be more risky with moderate. That is, more money is going to be invested in the stock option that we offer, or the growth. Or if somebody's very familiar with investments, maybe they want to create their own portfolio. Maybe they want to do a little bit of investing and saving at the same time. And so they can choose between any of the pre-designed portfolios, the FDIC option, as well as our money market fund, which is run through the state of Florida. That's called Florida Prime. We shall have two broad-based mutual fund options, a U.S. bond and stock that are, as I mentioned, they're a mutual fund type of product where they're already really diversified in a bunch of different companies, or an international product as well. So all really already diversified products that we offer. So anywhere from a savings account to international type of investment, that can all be done through the ABLE account. So how money's in there, it's sitting now. People want to utilize it. How does that work? What does that look like? So generally, there's three different ways individuals can get funds out of their account. One is back to a connected bank. So when somebody creates the account, they'll be able to add a bank account to it. That's primarily the mechanism for people putting funds into the ABLE account. But they can go back and then add a second or third bank account. So maybe they have mom and dad are like, hey, we'll add our bank account. We'll contribute to your ABLE account that way. But when you want to make a withdrawal, it's back to that individual with a disabilities account, and you can add multiple bank accounts. Usually, that ACH transfer takes 2 to 3 business days. We also offer a reloadable prepaid Visa card. It's a prepaid debit card that can be utilized anywhere Visa is accepted. There's a monthly maintenance fee. We'll talk about that, but that usually takes 2 to 3 business days as well. So if somebody wanted to go down to their, to their local big box store and buy something, um, they would have to make sure that they have those funds preloaded. So it does take some planning ahead of time, because at the end of the day, this is an investment type product. So those have to be sold and then cleared, and then that cash sent to whatever. Individuals also request a check via the phone or go online to request a check, and that does take longer, 5 to 7 business days. It could be even longer, just depending on the mail. If you're like me and have done any shopping this year towards Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you may celebrate, my Amazon packages are always always get notifications like, oh, it's going to be another 2 days. So, when someone does do a check request and it's coming through the mail, it could take longer depending on delivery. Things to be mindful of, and we'll talk a little bit on the next QA about taxes. Uh, Generally, as I mentioned, this is an investment savings tool. Those funds can grow, and if they grow, they're going to get earnings. When they make a withdrawal, part of that withdrawal is going to be money that they originally put in, as well as some earning. And there's no taxes on the earning as long as they use it for qualified disability expenses. And we'll spend a significant amount of time talking about that. They also get to choose when that money comes out, where it's coming from. So if they have multiple options, they can say maybe they want to just come out of the savings so they can continue to invest. But it does trigger tax documentation. So keep documents on why it's qualified disability expenses. So what is qualified disability expenses? What can these funds actually be utilized for? The Treasury came out with 13 broad categories saying, hey, if you use funds from an ABLE account and there are qualified disability expenses, if you could justify it in one of these categories, then it's going to be fine. And so we'll just tackle a few of these. Let's talk about health first, right? So yeah, they might be on iBudget waiver, but maybe they want to take some additional classes. Maybe they want to get a massage. Maybe they want to take equestrian therapy, or maybe it's services that are not covered by their Medicaid or their health. As long as it's for that individual and it's going to help improve or maintain their health, independence, or quality of life, and that's a qualified disability expenses. So they could utilize it for that massage or those additional therapies. Maybe it's for education. Maybe they want to do higher learning. Maybe they want to take additional skills classes that aren't being offered. Maybe it's just for a parent wanting to go back to school shopping. All that would be qualified. So anything education wise. Housing, if you're, if APD is not paying for their residential, but maybe they're paying their fair share at home, and they need to make home modifications to make it more accessible, that would be a qualified disability expense. Maybe it's them paying their fair share of rent, mortgage, utilities. That would be a qualified disability expense. Transportation. I have a friend that uses their prepaid reloadable card to take Ubers and Lyfts. That's a form of transportation. It could be used to put a down payment on a vehicle. Some of our biggest success stories have come from individuals utilizing their ABLE account to make a payment for transportation. Maybe it's a flight to a conference or to the beach or something to get away from it all. All those, as long as that is the primary dividing line is Is it for that individual with a disability? And is it going to help improve, maintain their health, independence, or quality of life? The legal fees, we'll talk a little bit about special needs trust, but that could be utilized to help somebody set that up. Assistive technology and support, whether that be devices, whether that be modifications to their wheelchair, or whatever the case may be. Maybe they have additional supports that they're not getting currently, and they're using their able accounts to pay for those. And then we'll talk about funeral and burial. But yes, even post-death, these accounts can be used to pay those end-of-life expenses. And then finally, other Treasury put this in here. They haven't really given any additional guidance, but they gave us an example of somebody using a cell phone and a cell phone plan, whether that be to help them with their independence or to navigate or communicate. All that would be a qualified disability expenses. So if somebody's making a withdrawal and paying for these qualified disability expenses, do they have to file taxes now because they're going to get a 1099 QA or 5490 QA, 5498 QA for establishing the account? And the answer is typically not. You may want to talk to your tax advisor, but generally, if an individual makes a withdrawal, at the end of the year, tax return is going to be sent saying, hey, you had this amount of withdrawals for the whole calendar year. And that, let's just say it's $1,500. Of that $1,500, maybe 100 of it was actual earnings. You don't have to pay taxes on that $100 as long as you had $1,500 of qualified disability expenses. So we tell individuals, when you get that statement, it's good to file receipts with that statement to justify that you met that amount of expenses for that calendar year. Social Security Administration is looking at it more regularly, so they might want documentation sooner. But for the IRS purposes, just keep records on what the expenses were used for, what the withdrawals were used for. So how much does this cost, right? It sounds too good to be true. It's free to enroll in the Able United account, right? So we don't have a enrollment fee, no application fee. Our investment products, if you're investing in some of our more riskier options or some of the mutual fund type products, there is an annualized fee of that. For example, if you had $10,000 for the whole calendar year, you might be paying upwards to $29. And that's going to be net of the fee. So if you go to our performance tab on our website, that's net of returns, that's net fees of this finance charge. If individuals do want paper statements, there's an annual $10 fee for that, but people can always go online to download their statements electronically. And if somebody does want that optional Visa prepaid card, it offers that additional flexibility. However, it does come with a cost of $250 per month. That's going to be deducted from the balance of the card. So keep those in mind. And really, we try to make this the best value for Floridians without charging any of these fees. The biggest ones is no monthly account maintenance fee. As I mentioned, other states offer these programs. For example, I know several people that have a Fidelity Able account that's run by the Massachusetts program, but they have a $60 annual fee for that program. So we don't have any of those annual or monthly maintenance fees, as well as no paper check requests. So I know that's a big feature. A lot of people like to be able to do online bill pay, and they know they can do that with the Able United account. And we have all this through the backing of Florida Prepaid, which has been around for 30 years. All right. I'm doing good. I'm assuming there's no I see some questions coming up here.
Yes,
What do we have, Steph?
One is going back to when an individual passes. So this is kind of a situation. It reads, if a family member gifts the Able account $5,000 and the beneficiary passes before the $5,000 is spent, does the amount instantly become part of the estate, or can the family member get $5,000 back, sent, never spent, and the beneficiary is deceased?
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I have a whole section where we're talking about as it relates to death of beneficiary. But no, typically in that situation, it would unfortunately go to the estate. However, it could also be used to pay for funeral and burial. And so the section after this one on special needs trucks talks about death of beneficiary, and we'll talk about that. But it could be used, like I mentioned, funeral and burial. If they had outstanding bills that still need to be paid, whether that be a cell phone or credit card bill, all those type of expenditures could be utilized first. Then it could go to the estate. And then, if they're under the age of 55, there's no estate Medicaid recovery. And so most likely it would go based on their will or to whoever's next in line. But we will get to that section specifically here momentarily. Is there another question?
Yes, there is one more. So who decides if the expense is beneficial? It's the term that you were using. The client feels some type of aromatherapy or acupuncture is needed. It's their money, so their choice, right?
That is correct, right? At the end of the day, the really time when it comes into jeopardy is if the IRS audits an individual and they say, okay, individual with disability, you're being audited by the IRS. We see that you have an ABLE account and you had $2,000 of withdrawals last year. Provide $2,000 in receipts, right? And so we usually tell individuals keep those receipts and a note on why it's a qualified disability expense. Like, why is aromatherapy beneficial for their health? Does it help them calm down? Does it help them? Does it relax them? Whatever the case may be, it doesn't have to be medically justified either. So to keep that in mind. And then not giving away what, if you gave them money away and say, oh, I'm purchasing gifts for somebody else, that's not going to be qualified. Social Security Administration also looks at if something's qualified disability expense, but really they only care if somebody's retaining the funds, right? So if I took $500 out of my ABLE account today, I waited till January 28th to spend that money. And Social Security is going to say, hey, beginning of January 1, we see you had an extra $500 in your checking account. What was it going to be used for? We see that it came out of your ABLE account. What are you going to utilize it for? They might say, aromatherapy is now a qualified disability expense. Because, it's Social Security Administration. They kind of make up, depending on who you talk to, what rules they may or may not follow. But usually that justification comes from the individual who makes the withdrawal and why it's helping benefit them. And once again, that comes into question if IRS or SSA asks. That's a good question. All right, we're going to touch a little bit about ABLE and special needs trusts. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I'm not an attorney, but high level ABLE accounts are not special needs trusts, right? So special needs trust is part of that estate planning process. It's where maybe mom, dad, grandparents, a business, a friend wants to leave money aside for an individual without negatively impacting their future. And so that's what we call a third party special needs trust. There's also situations where an individual may have a first party special needs trust where maybe they got in an accident and receiving a settlement. Maybe they won the lottery and they want to put those funds aside so they can continue to maintain their eligibility for Medicaid, right? So that's really why a special needs trust exists. And so there's ABLE accounts, and then there's what we call D4A, D4C, and a third party special needs trust. So D4A and D4C, they're first party trusts, but they're different kind. Would that be a qualified income trust where it allows people to earn more, but then they have to uh, use that to pay off Medicaid, or maybe it's D4C, which is a pool type of trust. And so this is just a high level chart to show you kind of the differences between the program. I'll highlight where the differences are for ABLE. So for example, we are limited on how much can be contributed. However, trust can hold millions of dollars and be funded with millions of dollars. The beneficiary, if there's a third party special needs trust, those funds can be distributed after death to other individuals. However, if it's a first party special needs trust, there's a mandatory Medicaid payback. So keeping that in mind, this one on food might be changing in the future, but typically trust can't pay for food or housing. ABLE accounts can. ABLE does kind of have a maximum. The most you can get up to is 418,000 before no more funds can be contributed. They can continue to grow. ABLE's exempt from creditors, so creditors can't go after an ABLE account, just like a third-party special needs trust. Other things to think about is just the fees. ABLE accounts are generally free. Trust typically can cost money. And then also what happens to the money after the individual passes away, we'll talk about. So I mentioned there's two types of trust: first party, so somehow that money belongs to the individual with a disability. There's the standard special needs trust, where it's maybe an unplanned inheritance we receive and they're setting that up to maintain their Medicaid eligibility. There's also qualified income trust, D4Bs. Somebody's working more, but they want to keep their Medicaid. And then finally, D4Cs are pool trusts. Probably a lot of the individuals you work with, or you might have heard if you've been in this field for a while, about pool trust. Usually it's pulling together individuals with money. Maybe they don't have hundreds of millions of dollars, but they have 50, 60, $70,000. A pool trust would be an appropriate place to say, hey, we could put that in there, keep them eligible, and then use those funds as needed. Now, there are mandatory paybacks for Medicaid on first party. Now, third party is different, right? Third party is set up by a family friend. It's for the benefit of the person with the disability. It could be funded now or in the future. So if you think of a insurance policy, if I pass away, I have a life insurance policy that's going to be paid out. That can be used in a third party trust to make sure that my kids or my child with a disability is taken care of. There is no pay to back. Instead, it would go to a different beneficiary, other benefits. High level, those differences. This is just a snapshot. Once again, I'm not an attorney, so keep this as educational, but how much you could put in it per calendar year is different. Special needs trust really part of that bigger scope of high estate planning. Able accounts are more of the, hey, I want to put money away now. Where can I do that? Or they're over resourced by a couple of $1,000. I could put that into an able account. Um, Now, I don't want to talk about death of beneficiary before we open up for any more questions we may have. So, uh, here's the statute that talks about what we passed that says, hey, the state's not going to file a claim on an able account. However, things to note is other states may file claims. So some states are proactively filing claims on able accounts. So if you have an out-of-state residence that's had Medicaid in their previous state may file uh, you know, a claim on that person's able account to recoup some of those Medicaid costs. Those are things to think about. Uh, there is the ability to list a successor designated beneficiary on an able account. So maybe I'm an individual with a disability. I have a sibling who also has a disability that qualifies for an able account. I can list them. So it is limited to a sibling who qualifies for an able account. I already mentioned this, so I got my slides backwards, but this is the Medicaid repayment from other states. Once again, this document, this presentation, you can go and download and read all the nitty gritty and kind of get these links for you. We're basically saying, hey, other states can file a claim if they have somebody that received Medicaid from their state at some point in time. So how does this really work practically here in the state of Florida? And so I'll spend some time on this. So generally, if we are notified that there's been a death of a beneficiary, right? So we get a call, we get an email, customer service is notified, hey, so and so, Bobby Jones, she passed away. She has an able account with you all. We're going to freeze the account to prevent any additional contributions into it, right? Because at that point, it's no longer technically an able account, or that beneficiary is passed, and now they shouldn't be able to contribute to it. However, if there's somebody managing that account, so whether it be a rep payee, a parent, there's some kind of what we call authorized legal representative on the account, they can continue to withdraw funds to pay for outstanding qualified expenses. So maybe they had outstanding bills that needed to be paid, housing, funeral and burial, all those can still be paid until there comes to a point where they need to say, okay, there are no more qualified disability expenses. We need to dispose of this account. So usually we would get either a court order or documentation from an attorney saying Bobby Jones has passed. She has an able account with you all. There's no more qualified disability expenses. Please send us a check to her estate for the remaining balance, which we'll do. So that's usually the step. Now, if there is a successor designated beneficiary, there is a possibility that would go after all these qualified disability expenses are paid, including if there was any Medicaid recovery, then that would go to that successor designated beneficiary. If the account was being managed by the beneficiary themselves, we would just freeze the account completely until we get some kind of documentation on who's responsible for the disposable of that account. So typically, who's their personal representative, and if there's a state. Things to keep in mind about Medicaid recovery in general is for a state Medicaid recovery, the individual has to be over the age of 55 before that takes place. So if you're dealing with children or young adults, uh, and they pass away, typically this money would go back to the family or to the estate and be distributed. However, if they're over the age of 55, Medicaid will file an estate claim to recoup any Medicaid services they received over their life. So the example that was given earlier, what if a family neighbor, for example, gives somebody $5,000 into their ABLE account, lo and behold, 5 months, 6 months down the road, they pass away and they haven't used all that $5,000. What happens? Generally, outstanding qualified expenses, which I mean, a decent funeral could be $8, $10, $15,000, and then it would go to the estate which that family may be able to recoup or not. So that's something just to think in mind and plan as you think about able accounts. If there's a significant amount of money, like maybe if somebody wanted to give $100,000, an able account couldn't be that. So that's when that special needs trust is. So it's really kind of justifying what you can use it for and planning it out. So, for example, we see, for example, special needs trusts that fund able accounts. Typically, they don't send the bulk of the money each at the beginning of the year. Typically, they send a certain amount each month. So that way, if there's a situation where they need to have additional funds come in from somebody else, or maybe they wanted to say, okay, we know this is about your monthly expenditure, so that's all the amount we're going to give you. So really provides you the flexibility, but that whole idea of planning and stuff and why it's important. So go ahead, if you haven't already, now is the time to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. I want to leave you with our connect with us. So maybe this is some great information you could take back to the families and the individuals that you help and assist. Maybe that family or the individuals want to contact me directly or the program. You can go to our website, ableunited.com/contact. They can actually schedule a meeting with me directly, or they can call our customer service 9 to 6 p.m. Eastern time, or use the Florida Relay to get a hold of us. They should be able to answer basic questions and help and assist individuals with their accounts. We also have information available in our Spanish and Haitian Creole. We have live chat on our website. And if you're looking for where we might be in your city, as I mentioned, we're not tied directly to the bank or a city, but we are a state agency. We do a lot of events in person. And if there's an opportunity, maybe you want to have all your clients, maybe you have a caseload of 20, 30 people and they all wanted to get together, we could set up a webinar and you can utilize for that. But with that, I want to leave our thank you here. Don't forget the resources tab, download that information, and then also certificates we'll be sending out hopefully early next week to you all. And so please be patient in that regards. But Steph, do we have any additional questions that have came in about able accounts or Able United?
Yes, we do have one more. You might have to answer this separately, but a person submitted, I'm dealing with an individual that has an able account and her account was placed on hold and the customer service could not tell her why, just stated she needed to send a copy of her ID. What can cause that to happen?
Okay, so sometimes what happens if an individual is setting up an account and for some reason their personal identification information wasn't correct, uh, they may request a government issued ID to come in order to verify the identity. So just some history about that. So our back end company, so is Vestwell. They actually contract to Bank of New York Mellon, which, as being a bank, they have what they call know your customer procedures, where they have to verify individuals who are doing any type of finances thing. So they may be a situation where they just need to verify the identity of the individual. That's most likely the case. If the account was previously established and now it's been closed, there is a way where you can go on the phone along with whoever's account it is. She typically can give customer service permission to talk on her behalf, to speak to you all to find out more information. If you want to, you can just shoot me an email, john.finch@ableunited.com, or if you just reply to our MailChimp email that talked about this webinar, I'll get that as well, or info@ableunited.com. And if you give me the account number, I can do a little more research on my end as well. All right, any other questions from individuals about able accounts? I know we have like about a minute left. All right. Well, I don't see any yet. If you do have additional questions, feel free to shoot us an email. We'll get back to them or schedule a meeting with myself and our team. We'll be more happy to meet with you or the individual you serve. I hope you learned something new about able accounts. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Best of you to you all, and hope you join this training. As I mentioned, we'll look for a certificate early next week. But until we meet again, thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.